You know, when you think of Berkshire Hathaway, the first name that pops into your head is probably Warren Buffett, right? But behind the Oracle of Omaha, there was another genius, the intellectual architect who actually designed one of the greatest investment vehicles in history. Today, we are diving deep into the worldly wisdom of that man, Charlie Munger.
So, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll pull back the curtain on his true role as the architect behind Buffett. Then, we'll get into his toolbox, exploring what he called the latticework of models and the super simple trick of inversion. We'll also unpack his secret weapon for avoiding huge mistakes, a deep, deep understanding of human psychology. And we'll wrap up with a challenge for you, how you can start using these powerful tools today.
All right, let's kick things off with what might be the biggest misconception about Berkshire Hathaway. While Warren Buffett was absolutely the face of the company, Charlie Munger was never, ever just a sidekick. He was the master architect.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. Warren Buffett himself said it best. In his 2024 letter to shareholders, he made it crystal clear. Buffett was the master builder, yeah, but Munger was the one who drew up the blueprints for their incredible success.
So, you see this dynamic, right? Buffett was the public face, the one everyone knew. Munger, on the other hand, intentionally stayed behind the scenes. His most critical role? To be the devil's advocate. In fact, Buffett lovingly called him the abominable no man, because he was often the only person who would consistently say no and, in doing so, save Buffett from billion-dollar mistakes.
So what made Munger's no so powerful? I mean, how did he actually build that blueprint for success? Well, it all comes down to his core philosophy, something he called worldly wisdom.
Munger's big idea was this. True wisdom isn't about becoming a super specialized expert in just one field. No. Instead, it's about building a framework, a latticework, of the most fundamental ideas from many, many different disciplines. When you connect these models, you start to see the world with a kind of clarity that almost everyone else misses.
And he pulled these models from everywhere you can imagine. He'd use psychology to understand how incentives completely warp people's thinking. Then he'd borrow the idea of critical mass from physics to analyze a business. It wasn't about being an expert in all these things. It was about grabbing the single most powerful idea from each discipline to build a much more complete picture of reality.
This quote, this just perfectly captures the exact danger he was trying to avoid. He called it the man with a hammer tendency. Think about it. If your only tool is a hammer, every single problem starts to look like a nail. If your only mental model is from economics, you're going to totally miss the psychological forces at play. Worldly wisdom is all about making sure you have a full toolbox.
Okay, so keeping that full toolbox in mind, let's look at one of his most powerful and, honestly, kind of weird tools. It's a super simple idea he got from a 19th century mathematician. Always, always invert.
So instead of asking, how can I be successful, Munger would just flip the question completely on its head. In this one famous speech he gave, he asked the students, how can you guarantee a life of misery? It's brilliant, because by figuring out what not to do, the path to success just becomes crystal clear. And his prescriptions for total failure? They're so simple it's almost funny. You want to be miserable? Easy. Just rely only on your own experience. Never learn from other people. Give up the second things get tough. By just doing the opposite of these things, by avoiding these obvious traps, you naturally start steering yourself toward a better life.
He was constantly driving this point home with a phrase he borrowed from the great mathematician Carl Jacobi. The quote you see here says, "Fangguala xiang, zangsha fangguala xiang," which translates to invert, always invert. It's just a simple reminder that so many of the hardest problems become way, way easier to solve when you just turn them upside down.
Now, if Munger had a secret weapon, this was it. He was absolutely obsessed with understanding the psychological biases that lead really smart people to make just terrible decisions.
And I want to be clear, this wasn't just some casual interest. Munger meticulously identified and cataloged 25 standard causes of human misjudgment. Think about that for a second. He literally created a checklist of mental errors, like a pilot's pre-flight checklist for his own brain, to make sure he avoided the most common traps.
And his list includes these powerful forces that, we all recognize. For instance, the reward and punishment super response shows just how powerfully incentives control us. Simple psychological denial, that's just our brain's tendency to reject painful truths. And social proof tendency is that gut instinct to follow the crowd, even when the crowd is running off a cliff. Munger saw these not as little quirks, but as dangerous bugs in our mental software.
Munger loved to tell this one story that really gets to the heart of this idea.
So, there's a guy selling fishhooks with these bizarre, brightly colored lures. Someone asks him, do the fish actually bite on those? And his reply was perfect. Sir, I'm not selling to the fish. It's such a great reminder. Success comes from understanding the psychology of your actual customer. In this case, the fisherman, not the fish.
So what does this all add up to? What is Munger's ultimate legacy? Well, it's not just about the billions of dollars he helped create. It's the practical, timeless wisdom that he left behind for all of us.
Munger often quoted this line, especially in his later years. And the sword he's talking about leaving behind, it isn't a weapon. It's his entire toolkit of worldly wisdom. The latticework of models, the power of inversion, that checklist of psychological biases. These are the blades he's offering to anyone who's willing to learn how to use them.
And that, right there, is the ultimate question. Munger gave us the blueprints. Build a latticework of models, always invert the problem, and master your own psychology. The tools are on the table. So the only question left is, how will you wield them?